$2.5 billion in restricted NVIDIA AI chips, allegedly smuggled out of the United States by Supermicro Computer's own co-founder. Not through some underground network, through the company's own supply chain. Repackaged in unmarked boxes, routed through shell companies in Southeast Asia. And when federal auditors came to inspect the warehouse, they found rows of servers sitting exactly where they should be. Except those servers were hollow. Dummy units with no chips inside, staged specifically to pass inspection. Surveillance footage, now part of the federal case, allegedly shows warehouse workers using a hairdryer to peel serial number stickers off real server packaging and transfer them onto the fakes. That is the level of detail prosecutors describe in the indictment unsealed on March 19, 2026. The three individuals charged are not peripheral contractors. Yi-Hsian Wally Liao is a co-founder of Supermicro and a member of its board, controlling $464 million in company stock. Rui Tsang Stephen Chong managed sales from the Taiwan office. Tingwei Willie Sun served as what prosecutors call a fixer, the operational link between the servers leaving the US and their alleged final destination, China. Supermicro Computer trades on NASDAQ. It carries institutional shareholders. It had been one of the defining infrastructure plays of the AI boom. And its stock dropped over 33% in a single day when the indictment became public, wiping out nearly $5 billion in market value. This is not a story about bad actors slipping through a system. It is a question about whether the system could ever have caught them. To understand how $2.5 billion allegedly moves without detection, you have to go back to where Supermicro started and why everyone believed in it. Supermicro Computer was founded in San Jose, California, a deliberate address. Silicon Valley credibility on one side, deep operational ties to Taiwan's manufacturing ecosystem on the other. That dual positioning was not accidental. It was the structural advantage the company was built around. The model was straightforward and genuinely compelling. US-designed architecture, Taiwan-speed supply chains, and a relentless focus on server hardware that enterprise customers actually needed. No consumer products, no brand campaigns. Just dense, efficient, high-performance infrastructure, the kind that data centers buy by the rack. When NVIDIA's GPU adoption began reshaping what AI infrastructure required, Supermicro was already positioned at exactly the right intersection. It became one of the defining vendor plays of the cycle. Institutional investors saw a company with real engineering depth, NASDAQ-listed accountability, and a market tailwind that looked structural rather than speculative. Enterprise customers saw a reliable supplier with the flexibility to customize at scale. The thesis was not a stretch. It was grounded. But inside that engineering culture was something less visible. The company ran on founding-era relationships, tight networks of trust built over decades, where institutional knowledge lived in people rather than process. That informality was an operational asset. It enabled speed. It enabled flexibility. It enabled the kind of supplier coordination that slower competitors could not match. It also meant that individuals with deep institutional access operated in spaces where formal controls had never fully taken root. The same architecture that made Supermicro credible had quietly made it permeable. And when the AI boom arrived and the pressure to perform intensified, that permeability would be tested in ways the market had not priced in. By 2023, Supermicro is not simply participating in the AI infrastructure build-out, it is one of its primary physical expressions. Every major hyperscaler and AI research lab needs server racks configured around NVIDIA's most advanced GPUs. Supermicro is supplying them. Revenue accelerates. Analyst coverage intensifies. The stock becomes a high-conviction position in AI infrastructure portfolios, with valuation multiples expanding in lockstep with the broader NVIDIA ecosystem. The logic is airtight on the surface. If AI compute demand is structural, and if NVIDIA GPUs are the core component, then whoever builds the racks around those GPUs captures durable, recurring revenue. Supermicro fits that thesis precisely. Price targets rise. Institutional allocation increases. The bull case feeds itself. But the same hardware driving that thesis, NVIDIA's advanced AI chips, sits at the center of U.S. export control policy. Washington has drawn a clear line. These components do not reach China. The controls are active, enforced, and explicit about the strategic rationale. What prosecutors allege is that during this exact window of peak growth, a parallel operation was running. Shipments were moving through Taiwan and Southeast Asian intermediaries, each transfer designed to obscure the final destination from auditors and compliance reviewers. The diversion network was not operating in spite of the growth cycle, it was operating inside it. When a company becomes synonymous with a macro trend, internal scrutiny softens. Growth becomes the primary metric, compliance becomes overhead. That is not unique to Supermicro. It is a documented pattern in high-velocity cycles. But while analysts were raising price targets, prosecutors were building a case. The question is, what exactly were the co-founders and managers allegedly doing, and how did it stay hidden? The alleged mechanism is not complicated. It is, in fact, its simplicity that makes it damaging. U.S. prosecutors allege that a co-founder, a sales manager, and an outside contractor structured a deliberate multi-hop routing scheme. AI servers containing NVIDIA chips subject to export controls left the United States with declared destinations in Taiwan and Southeast Asia. A shell company in the region compiled fake paperwork to appear as the end user. From there, prosecutors allege, a separate logistics firm repackaged the servers into unmarked boxes and forwarded them to China. Each transfer was a layer of distance between the shipment and its actual endpoint. Each hop made the final destination harder for auditors to trace. This is not a civil matter. Selling controlled AI hardware to Chinese entities without federal authorization is a criminal violation of U.S. export law. The distinction between a compliance failure and a federal crime is not semantic. It determines whether the response is a fine or a prosecution. What makes the alleged scheme structurally significant is who prosecutors say ran it. Wally Liaw is not a peripheral figure. He co-founded Supermicro in 1993 alongside CEO Charles Liang, and he served on the board while controlling $464 million in company stock. Stephen Chang managed the Taiwan sales office, the exact pipeline through which the servers transited. And Willie Sun operated as the logistics fixer, connecting the supply chain to its alleged Chinese recipients. Internal compliance systems are structurally poorly equipped to audit the people who helped build them. That is not a flaw unique to Supermicro. It is a documented vulnerability in any organization where authority and oversight share the same origin. The operational details prosecutors describe are striking. To pass audits, the defendants allegedly staged thousands of dummy servers, non-functional replicas placed in the Southeast Asian warehouse to satisfy inspectors. Workers were caught on surveillance footage using a hairdryer to soften adhesive, peeling serial number stickers off real packaging and pressing them onto the decoys. When auditors scanned the barcodes, every number matched. Every shelf looked full. The real servers were already in China. Supermicro's formal response is measured. The three individuals are no longer employed. The company states it is not named as a defendant in the U.S. action and has launched an internal investigation led by independent directors. The alleged total, at least $2.5 billion. Not a single transaction, a sustained operational pattern prosecutors describe as deliberate and concealed. Once those allegations became public, the consequences moved fast. In the stock price, in the boardroom, and in the broader question of whether U.S. export controls can actually hold. The market does not wait for verdicts. On March 20th, 2026, the day after the indictment was unsealed, Supermicro's stock cratered 33%, closing at $20.53. Nearly $5 billion in market value evaporated in a single session. From a 52-week high above $62, the collapse was not just a valuation correction. It was a reputational discount that institutional shareholders are now carrying on their books. Securities lawsuits followed. Analyst risk assessments began mapping a compounding liability profile, one where legal exposure, reputational damage, and regulatory scrutiny reinforce each other rather than resolve cleanly. The company is not named as a defendant in the U.S. prosecution action. That distinction matters legally. It does not fully insulate the enterprise from the fallout. The board's response follows a recognizable post-crisis posture. An independent, director-led investigation has been launched, a structural attempt to separate the company's institutional exposure from the conduct of the named individuals. It is a standard mechanism. It is also a high-stakes one, because its credibility depends entirely on what it finds, and whether those findings are disclosed with precision. The regulatory dimension extends beyond Supermicro itself. Policy analysts and technology export control specialists are now treating this case as a stress test for the entire U.S. semiconductor restriction framework. If a NASDAQ-listed, institutionally monitored company could allegedly route $2.5 billion in controlled hardware through multi-hop intermediaries, the enforceability question becomes systemic. The investigation is ongoing. The allegations remain unproven in court. The full scope of the diversion network has not been publicly established. The legal outcome is still being written, but the strategic lesson about control architecture, founding-era trust, and what happens when compliance is treated as overhead, that lesson is already available. Every control failure follows the same architecture: a real company, real revenue, real institutional credibility. And somewhere inside that structure, a gap between who holds the most access and who holds the most oversight. Supermicro built genuine technology. The product worked. The market position was earned. The failure was not in the engineering. It was in the governance layer that allowed founding-era insiders to allegedly operate outside the visibility of the audit systems designed to catch exactly this kind of exposure. The escalation pattern is structural, not exceptional. When the AI boom arrived, velocity became the primary metric. Compliance became overhead. That condition does not create bad actors, but it amplifies whatever latent fragility already exists inside the organization. Companies with tight founding networks and cross-border supply chain relationships carry a specific risk that standard audit frameworks are not calibrated to surface. The people with the deepest institutional access are precisely the people those frameworks are least equipped to scrutinize. The trigger was U.S. export controls on NVIDIA AI chips. That regulatory framework converted an internal control failure into a federal prosecution. The legal tripwire was always there. The alleged operation ran until it crossed it. A co-founder with $464 million in stock, a Taiwan sales manager, an outside fixer, at least $2.5 billion in alleged diversions, dummy servers, swapped serial numbers, routing through Taiwan and Southeast Asia, specifically structured to stay below audit detection, and an independent director investigation as the governance response. The strategic question for every founder and investor is not whether your company has a compliance policy. It is whether your compliance architecture has real visibility into the people with the most institutional access and the least oversight. If $2.5 billion in restricted AI hardware can allegedly move through a publicly traded, audited, institutionally monitored company without detection. What does that tell us about the distance between policy intent and operational reality?